first Tummler School of 2022. I think it's about the 9th or 10th in total. We're going to be inviting Delwyn Derrick from Wrexham to share a bit of his wisdom and his approach to change making in his community, all based around, but not exclusively based around football. Before we invite Delwyn to take the floor, just a little bit of background about ourselves. Andy, Russell, myself, that's me, Matt, and Sarah, who is the fourth musketeer at Grow Social Capital. There's our individual sort of backgrounds and specialisms. There's some social links at the bottom, so give us a follow there. Previous Tummler School speakers, as I said, we've had several. The last couple were Karen Davis, who runs a remarkable organisation called Purple Shoots, providing finance to all sorts of social community enterprises that tend to get overlooked by the traditional sources of finance, and very kind of humble, just kind of working away in the background to achieve some remarkable change, or help other people to achieve some remarkable changes in their lives, their communities. Quite fascinating. Before that, Pam French as well, where we go from less the hyper-local. I think that's the word we're going to hear from Delwyn today. We've heard it, the concept of, or different concepts of local and community with other people, other Tummler speakers previously. Pam came at it from a slightly different angle, with how she intervened at a bit more of an international, global level, with being at the vanguard of trying to repatriate some of the interpreters who worked with the British and Allied forces in Afghanistan, and who were left high and dry, is the polite way of putting it, when the forces withdrew, and has been at the vanguard of helping some of those repatriate. Where change in that context is literally pretty much a life and death matter. So those are the last two, and they're up on our website, where all of them go, with people like Sophie Howe, Alex Hillman over in Philadelphia, Peter Davis, the former Sustainable Futures Commissioner, former chair of WCV, or about to stand down as chair, I think, not quite former yet, and others. Delwyn, I'll knock the sharing off. Croeso, welcome to Tummler School. Thank you for agreeing to take part. I know you are up to your eyes with things in Wrexham, albeit list you as a sort of like award-winning, or refer to you as an award-winning football coach. I'm not doing a huge amount of coaching of football anymore. Do you want to give people a little idea of who you are and your background before we launch into the questions?
Yeah, sound. So just a quick warning though, my screen has gone completely black. So if you catch me picking my nose, it's only because I can't see what's going on right now. So I am the founder and secretary of Bellevue Football Club in Wrexham. We are the region's first and award-winning league-registered multi-ethnic and inclusion-specific football club. We basically provide football opportunities, league football opportunities, to people from what we call perceived adverse backgrounds, which are those that are suffering from like social poverty and things like that. Those that face barriers getting into the sport. We're a team for them, really.
I think it's interesting, this concept of sort of barriers then, in terms of something like football. I mean, as we were chatting just beforehand, Andy sort of referred to sort of Hackney Marshes, and you can look at any number of sort of fields, Park Trelaw, where my kids play on a Saturday. There's very little overtly obvious sort of barriers. But when you're talking about inclusion specific, to a game that has global appeal and so on and so forth, but when you talk about barriers, when you talk about being inclusion specific, is that a term that might need just breaking down a little bit for people who are a little bit unsure as to what that might mean?
Absolutely. So there's 1,000 reasons why people might not be able to find a football club locally, and that's where we come in. Really, we signpost to ourselves as being that club if you can't find another. So you tend to find with like asylum seekers and refugees, when they move into an area, they don't know that area, and it's where the club that reaches out to them and says, "Hey, do you want to come for a kick around, make some friends?" So we're sort of like, we're being proactive in engaging with those communities, whereas other football clubs, they're not proactive. They wouldn't necessarily turn someone away, but they're not being proactive in going out and trying to find them, and that's where we try to strike that balance. So it works the same. People with learning difficulties, and like mental health issues and stuff, maybe they won't be the type of people to be overtly going out and trying to find a football club. And when they turn up at a football club, maybe they don't fit in. There's many reasons why that wouldn't work out for them. And if it doesn't work out, we're a club where you can come and receive, an instant warm welcome and feel at home somewhere. So it's literally about looking at not the overt, but the covert reasons why people can't find football in this local area, and trying to offer it out to them. I've recently been lucky enough that I've been able to see what other people see when they come into our club. I had some health issues 2019, 2020. So I ended up with sepsis in 2019. Had to have 2 surgeries and lots of antibiotics to fix that. And then in one of my follow-ups, to make sure I was on the way to recovery, they discovered a tumor in my skull and decided to whip that out as well. So I'm one of those people now who would face a barrier getting into the sport, because I run on a football pitch wearing a scrum cap. Now, a lot of people would see me as a health and safety nightmare or an insurance risk, but at Bellevue, we don't see health and safety nightmares and insurance risks. We see people that deserve a chance to play football. So I've got to experience the other side of it through my own struggles, and for the first time, appreciate what we've managed to build.
So the word Tummler is Yiddish in origins, for people who don't know, and it is the role. It's the person who gets the party started, who literally would be paid by somebody in a sort of like a Yiddish-speaking sort of Jewish community, who is employed to get that party started, to get those first people on the dance floors, always the hardest ones. And we apply it to the concept of change and making change and being a change maker. So Delwyn, what excites you then about the idea of trying to tackle some of the things that you've referred to? Because I think the word perceived, I think, is really key as well. It's not, the adverse background, people might not necessarily identify it as such. It's other people that perceive it. So you're tackling some fairly significant issues and perceptions. What excites you about getting stuck into that? Because the easy life would be just to join a different football team and rock up on training, rock up on the weekend for the game, and then have a few beers after and go home. You seem to approach it a different way.
I guess the thing that excites me the most about being a force for change, as it were, a changemaker, I think is the word you use there, is it's how I was raised. I feel like I'm doing what I was always taught to do. So between my parents and in particular my grandfather, my tide, who was a community police officer, I was always brought up to be a good person. And what I'm doing here is it's just that. It's just being a good person. For me, there's no glory in what I do apart from the satisfaction I take from it myself. And I've come across some people that they've been through some things. I never force anyone to talk about why they would want to come to Bellevue, but I try to be friendly and approachable enough that at some point during their life at the club, they will tell me what they've been through and how they came to be at our club. And some of the stories I've heard, to be able to hear those stories but then see that person smile, that is the definition of doing good in your community. So for me, the rewards never been the awards or anything like that people want to throw at the club. For me, it's the players. The greatest reward is seeing the change we can make in people's lives. It's awesome. Best job in the world.
Yeah, you mentioned the awards. I mean, there's awards for yourself. St David's Day Award last year. There's been awards for the club, as you say. You're an ambassador for Wrexham's 2025 City Culture bid. Well, yourself and the club. How do you bring people along with that change then? Whether that's as the secretary and the coach of the club, or whether it's as the midfielder for the club, or it's people when you go in to visit other clubs for away fixtures, you welcome them to home fixtures at Bellevue. How do you bring people along with that?
Positivity is the only word you can use. We're a team that's renowned for the work we do, not for the results on the pitch. To be fair, the results on the pitch, they're not always great. We've won a handful of games, but we've lost a lot of games. But you'll never find a more positive group of players, and that's just through the positivity of what we're trying to do at the club that then brings people along by proxy, really. So, you know, our players are fully invested in what we do. The volunteers that obviously help me run the club, they're invested in what we do, and we're all invested over the positivity around the club. Now, whether that positivity is, you know, we've won a game for a change, or whether the positivity is, you know, someone's given us an award to recognise what we do, or whether the positivity is we've arranged an interesting friendly, you know, it doesn't matter. We can take whatever positive we want out of the club, whether it's on the field or off the field. And I think it's a message that we try and encourage people to take into their lives. Is you can take positivity from most situations in life if you look at it from the right angle. And we're just trying to make Bellevue that right angle, because essentially society doesn't reflect sport. Sport reflects society. So if we can create that positivity in the sport, hopefully we can encourage the people around the club to take that positivity back into their communities, create that positivity in society. So we try and bring people along with us that way. In a more physical sense, I am quite renowned for when we get invited to various different awards things. I never used to take my wife. I used to take players from the club. Now I am in the process of a divorce. I don't like to say the two are related, but I imagine not being invited to fancy dinners might have been a contributing factor. I'm not sure, to be honest. But in a very physical sense, if someone wants to give me an award, I don't ever feel like it's for me. It's for the people in the club who are the change, really. I just facilitate that. So I always take my players to things like that to give them, you know, to give them that positivity. Again, it's giving them a life experience that is positive.
Positivity in the face of adverse results, lots of losses, is something Andy, I can see nodding away as a West Ham fan, knows all about that. She mentioned your tide, your granddad, your Tad Key for those of us in the south. Anyone else has sort of inspired you, or anyone maybe you've learned from, whether that's maybe in the football world, I don't know.
Yeah, so I have a very interesting outlook on this, because I, say with positivity, I'll take inspiration from whoever inspires me. You know, when we talk about who's inspired me, it'd be easy for me to sit here and you know, name famous sports people. Oh, this person inspired me because of. But for me, it's the community champions that, you know. There's some that have been there and supported what I'm trying to do down at Bellevue since day one. They've always supported, but more than just, you know, support for the club. They've been a friend when I've needed one as well, which is excellent. You know, what more can you ask for? It's a friend and a support network. But then more recently, there's everyone gets it. So running a club like this for 5 years, sometimes it weighs heavy. And there's periods where, you know, I feel a little bit disheartened, not so much by the results or anything like that, just by how heavy the burden can be sometimes of trying to be that positive change, as you say, in the face of adversity, but also in the face of unreceptive people at times. And, you know, even then, I can take some inspiration from someone else around me if it's presented. So the most recent one would be a police officer called Dave Smith. Phoned me out of nowhere. It's always terrifying when you answer the phone and you get, "Hi, it's Dave Smith here from North Wales Police," and you think, "God, what have I been caught for?" You know, that's always a terrifying experience. But he was phoning up to ask for some advice. Really, he wanted to set up a community team made up of off-duty police officers to go into areas of low social demographic to try and break down the barriers between those vulnerable to being victims of or committing crimes and the police. And straight away there, that re-inspired me then that, you know, there's someone else out there that's also fighting for similar goals. And when you know you're not on your own in that fight, that's where you can get that inspiration. So if you were to ask me right now, do I have a personal hero? As of right this second, it would be Dave Smith. You know, in 6 months' time, I might have come across someone else that's re-inspired me to to keep going, keep fighting, keep doing what we do. And that answer may change. I'll take inspiration from anyone who inspires me. It's not something I can really put a pin on, because there's so many wonderful people out there that, I'm constantly meeting new people that inspire me. And if you wanted a full list, like, you'd have to give me a week.
Just drop the link into the chat. There's a guy by he's a Smith as well. I think it's Bobby Smith. It's called the Basketball Cop, and is a terrific example of, again, from a police background, where again there can be lots of perceived barriers, real barriers, actual barriers between themselves and communities. And he breaks a lot of that down just by being himself and being nice and treating people right. Some of the stuff that you talked about, it isn't necessarily all that complicated, I don't suppose. I might ask Matt or Andy to drop a link into the chat from the blog about this concept of inclusive tribalism, because football at the end of the day is known as being quite tribal. It's not always a savoury experience going away to games and meeting other fans and all the rest of it. And that's irrespective of the action on the pitch. So I suppose it's this sense that we again, perception. Is society more or increasingly polarized and divided? Sometimes it feels like that, even if it isn't. How important then is it, whether you're using your football team as a tool for that? Is it important to kind of bring people and to get together under some of those common values and shared goals, irrespective of those differences that we have, and some of those differences that we celebrate and that we cherish as well, whether that's the club you support, or in the case of the blog that will hopefully be dropped in there in a moment, or characteristics related to faith or gender or identity or anything else like that?
Society is absolutely polarized, and I think it's an inarguable point. It's evident by the fact that when there's 6 definitions of hate crime, which are like race, racism is a hate crime, homophobia is a hate crime. That hate crimes are a thing. And when we say is society polarized, yes, because how could you argue it isn't, when hate crime statistically has gone up every single year since 2013? Yeah, we live in a polarized world, because you have people trying to live their lives and people who think it's wrong that they should live their lives. That in itself is polarization. And when hate crime is the outcome of that, it is a problem. The whole common goals and values concept is something that we've sort of taken with our club and tried to not embellish but recreate. So our sort of common goal and value within the club is, I hate that phrase, that we should not focus on what's different about each other. We should focus on what we have in common. I hate that. And it's mostly because what we do is we take those polarizing characteristics and we push them to one side and say, right, don't focus on that. Focus on what makes you normal. Like, it's such a weird thing to do. What we do in Bellevue, I call it subjective normality. We celebrate the fact that we are all different, because subjectively that is our normal. So someone with mental health issues, it's not something that they grew. It's not like a third arm where they just randomly grew it. Mental health issues are a lifelong thing. So that is their normal. And what we try to do as a club is be open to that conversation about mental health, rather than being judgmental about it. And I say judgmental, but what I mean there is saying, let's forget about your mental health and focus on what you've got in common with everyone else. That doesn't work, because that is their normal. What they should have in common is the fact that they are a human being. That is the bottom line of commonality, as far as we're concerned. So we have this subjective normality approach where we create a peer support network. So if someone comes to us and says they're struggling with their mental health, if someone came to me now and told me that, I could put them in touch with 3 or 4 of our players that would be able to be a peer support network for that one. So suddenly that one person's got 3 people they can turn to within the club setting alone who have that shared life experience. And that's going to provide them far more support than us going, well, you need to go to therapy or you need to go to your GP. The first point of intervention with these adversities should be your friends and family. And if we're not friends at a football club, what the hell are we? And my argument on how we can bring that together against tribalism is summed up by the success of our club. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue that football is a game that smells of roses. We have had incidents over the years. You know, we've had racist comments passed, we've had homophobic comments passed, we've heard it all. But those incidents are few and far between. If I was to put an average on it, it's one per season. Other than that, we get clubs that stick up for us. We get clubs that defend us. Now, they may not be clubs set up like ours to address those adversities or those perceived adversities, but they respect the fact that we do. And there, we're already seeing that network starting to grow, because if somebody does do something untoward aimed at our club, because of what we stand for, we find that other clubs are starting to stick up for us and to fight our corner. And straight away, we're starting to see that tribalism break down, because in a polarized society, we're doing something that we feel is right and being vindicated by the other clubs within our league, the other clubs in the area. We've been vindicated nationally, regionally, locally, hyper locally. And that for us is an example of how you can break down tribalism within football. And it's an example of how this model of subjective normality and taking that message out into the community could also benefit the community. It's just whether people actually take it on board, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, break down some of that tribalism, but not do away with it altogether, or pretend it's not there or hasn't been there. You and, as I said, you and Bellevue are ambassadors for Wrexham City Culture Bid for 2025. It's the only one in Wales, so I hope people from Wales will be getting behind it. I mean, do you see that bid as a process of, in itself, a process of change, whether that's, I don't know, of perceptions, of understanding of what culture means?
So it's an opportunity for that. I don't think at the moment it is at its full potential. I think it's an opportunity to change the perception of this region. So obviously it's a county-wide bid. Wrexham's not a city, so our City of Culture bid is for the entire county of Wrexham. And I think quite often the perception of Wrexham is skewed. So there's over 70 languages spoken in this county. Like, multiculturalism and the acceptance of people that are different is at the very heart and soul of this town and this county. And I think the City of Culture bid is actually an opportunity to re-highlight that, because Wrexham's not immune to the rise in hate crimes and the rise in discrimination over the last almost 10 years now. We're not immune to it. We have seen it go up in this area. But I think a City of Culture bid where we reminded people that, this is a multicultural, welcoming town. It was voted one of the friendliest towns in the UK. And as I say, you've got 70 languages spoken across the area. We've got well-embedded community. So we've had a Polish community that's existed in Wrexham since the Second World War. And then we've got the Portuguese community. I think we've got over 2,000 Portuguese people that live in the Wrexham area as well. We've got African community groups, all kinds. It is literally a spectrum of people and stories. And if you were to sum up Wrexham's culture, you couldn't put your finger on any one thing. Are we the most arty place in the UK? No. Are we the most musical? Probably not. Are we the best at football? I mean, definitely not. But what we do have is a little bit of everything. And the little bit of everything comes from the people. Wrexham is a people first and foremost. It's not a geographical area. It's a people. And that people is diverse in its own right in the first instance. So for us, becoming the ambassadors, it was a no-brainer, because we celebrate everything that the City of Culture bid aims to celebrate. So for us, we're seeing, we've done it at our level within the sport of football, within our league, within our area association. And, that is the definition of hyperlocality, really. But this is the entire county taking the same message that we have at Bellevue Football Club and and pushing that out as a narrative to the entire United Kingdom of, look how great the people of Wrexham are. So for us, it was a no-brainer, because it celebrates everything that we celebrate as a club. So we had to do it. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, hashtag Wrexham with the Welsh, the CS 2025 is the hashtag to get on that. Okay, finally, we asked this to all Tummler school speakers. You have just 1 minute with the First Minister, with Mark Drakeford. What is the big change that you would ask of him?
I've been looking forward to this question. I've been rushing to get here. 1 minute is too short a time, so I will wait until next month, when I have an entire day with him to ask him many questions over the course of the day. But yeah, well, one of the things I'm going to enjoy speaking to Mr. Drakeford about is the North-South divide. It's a very real thing. I think they've taken little steps to try and ease the separation between North and South Wales, but at the moment it's still not enough. And the problem we would always have in Wales in addressing any of these societal issues is, how do they get out of South Wales, where the government sits, into North Wales, when there is such a disconnect between the two? My first inkling would be like a digital media revolution, with potentially looking at like a nationalised broadcasting. So Wales-specific broadcasting, Wales-specific print press, things that took away from the UK and just made it Wales-specific, so that we can actually have that communication and that digital dialogue between the North and South, which would ease the disconnect, which is actually going to make it easier to address these problems. It's the only thing I could really think about, because I was thinking about where we are as a country in Wales, and when you look at it, Wales is actually really progressive, along with Scotland. Scotland as well is hugely progressive, compared to like some of the things we see coming out of the UK government. I mean, it's important not to forget that we're in the Football v Homophobia Month of Action, so let's talk about Section 28. Section 28 was first repealed by the Scottish government. The Welsh government tried to have it passed at the same time, but unfortunately failed. But that wasn't done away with in England until 2003, I think it was. And then it wasn't completely outlawed in the Government Act, Local Government Act, until they brought out the Equality Act, which was in 2010. It's still possible for local authorities to discriminate against people from LGBTQ plus backgrounds in 2009, until they brought out the Equality Act. It's quite a horrendous thing, really. But Wales and Scotland have always been that little bit more progressive, and I think we'd all like them to be more progressive, but it takes time, and at least Wales are working towards that goal. I think what would make it a little bit quicker for Wales to work towards any goal is if we had that better communication network between the North and the South. So that would kind of be my first thing, is any problem you want to fight, you have to fight that problem as a nation. And I think the disconnect between North Wales and South Wales, we need to get rid of that before we stand any chance of any real and meaningful change. But as I say, I've got a whole day with Mr. Drakeford next month. So I will spend the whole day begging him to sort out the North-South divide, and I'll tell him that came from Tummler School.
Mark's got his hand up. I'll come to him in a moment. I don't know whether it's a question for you now, Delwyn, or he's asking you to pass something onto Mr. Drakeford. But really grateful for your time. There's something there that struck me in the course of that is, and I was going to mention it, and then the way you sort of answered that final question sort of reinforced it. That sense that sometimes people who are trying to sort of bring about change, it can be almost like, it feels like a heroic thing where people maybe feeling a bit lonely, they're on their own, they're sticking head above the parapet. You mentioned how you've got people in the club that you can fall back on for support and things like that, and I think that's really, really important to point out. And I think that point around sort of governments and politicians, etc., it's often the changes that people like yourselves and the things that you're doing, once that gets on their radar and once it kind of grows as aggregates and finds allies, and you talked about having allies elsewhere in among local clubs in Wrexham and around, it tends to be the politicians that bring about change at any kind of legal legislative level a bit later than a lot of people have already kind of fostered and galvanised and lobbied for. Obviously, there's any number of social movements, certainly progressive ones, to that effect. So, Diolch yn fawr, thank you very much. Going to throw it open. You can put questions, Lewis, particularly if you can't speak, in the chat panel if you wish. But I'll throw the floor open to Mark first.
Cheers, Russ. That point about the north-south divide, Darwin, I think it's interesting. I was up in Flintshire and then across to Blaenau Ffestiniog last week.
Unlucky.
And the reflection I've got actually is that there's more energy in the north than there is in the south. And sometimes when we talk about the north-south divide, it's almost that the north feels that it's not getting the same care and attention as the south. And I suggest that we could perhaps flip it on its head and think, actually, if the energy for the ideas, because you're further from power, you can do this more often than other times. Is this a real... So when you speak to Drakeford, instead of saying, help us to get closer to Cardiff, say, I'll tell you what, come and be closer to what we're doing up here, because you can go to any number of places and it's genuinely exciting what people are prepared to do when they know they won't get caught quickly. And I feel like don't wish for wanting to be closer to power, because power ultimately strangles real change rather than does it. Politicians, like Russ said, politicians will follow, I think, good ideas and just say, it's just like, this is where it's happening. It's, I don't want your bit. Come and copy me. That sort of thing. It's a change in perspective, perhaps.
Yeah, just that. First, I'd like to offer my deepest condolences. My family is from Blaenau Ffestiniog. I know how grey and miserable that place can be. So very sorry you had to go there. Regarding the north-south divide, I think you're absolutely spot on that South Wales gets a lot of investment, but North Wales has a hell of a lot of initiative, really. So, like, even from a footballing perspective now, you've got to look, the current president of the Football Association of Wales lives 10 minutes up the road. He's literally 10 minutes that way now, is the president of the Football Association of Wales. Like, we are an ambitious people up here in the north, and I think sometimes the argument is the investment doesn't come any further than Merthyr. And you're quite right with the, does Cardiff need to be closer to us? I've literally had this argument with someone before where I got invited to do something in South Wales, and I said, it's really expensive to get to South Wales. I have to go through England twice to get anywhere near Cardiff. Like, I'm not doing it. And the response I got was, oh, it's only for 4 hours on the train, or something like 3.5 hours on the train, whatever it was. And I emailed them back and I went, yes, that's how far it is for you to come from Cardiff to Wrexham. I'm a volunteer up here, and if they need me to go down south and do something, why are they asking a volunteer to pay out so much money when this is actual, like, it's an organization that's going to remain nameless that has money, and they're asking me as a volunteer to fork out. I think the cheapest train I found that would have got me there for when I needed to be there was £90 return. A volunteer asked to pay £100 to go down to Cardiff to do something that benefits them, when it's the same amount of time for them to get from Cardiff to North Wales. I think you're exactly right on that. It's not a case of, like, when I say I'm going to talk to Mr. Drakeford about the north-south divide, it's not arguing that more investment needs to come to North Wales. It's an argument for both cases, which is more investment does need to come to North Wales, but then in the same vein, there needs to be more social investment into South Wales from what we have in the north. I think we're guilty of hoarding our resource in North Wales, which is people, ideas, and initiatives. And in South Wales, I think there's guilt of hoarding the investment and the actual capital and the money. So I think it needs to work both ways. You need pan Wales solutions to the problems that are out there, and I think it's going to take work from both. North Wales has to work with South Wales in the same way that South Wales has to work with North Wales. I think if you achieve that, you start to achieve a real change. And it comes back. I literally just looked at my laptop screen there. I tell you what it is, it's tribalism. It's tribalism. In the north, we're so anti-South Wales sometimes when we see investment go into South Wales that we feel would be better in the north. we do get really anti-South Wales about it, but it's just tribalism. We're all Wales. I think the last time I got really annoyed was they were putting a load of money into a new theatre for Wales, and they decided to put it, I think it was in Bridgend. Now, already in that sort of area, you've got theatres in Cardiff, you've got them in Newport, you've got them in Swansea, then they're putting one in Bridgend. And in North Wales, we have Theatre Clwyd. Just one theatre. And, you know, I don't even go to the theatre that much, but it annoyed me because I don't go to theatre that much. But we have some fantastic creatives here in North Wales that quite simply just don't have that facility. But then they don't have the facility in North Wales, but it's not like they're taking their craft to South Wales. That's where that tribalism kicks in. They don't go down to South Wales because they feel annoyed at the fact that it doesn't exist in North Wales. There is a huge disconnect. I think it needs to, there needs to be leeway on both sides. I think that's exactly right.
Andy?
Hello, Russell, mate. Delwyn, superb talk, mate. Well done. Inspiring with, as you mentioned, your positivity. I'm interested because, for example, in Barry, I think they could do more, say, like Barry Town Football Club has a programme. We've got a local theatre, the Barry Memo, that struggles to get an audience. And I'm just thinking like the two of them like should cross-promote each other. And I'd just be interested in examples where you've got this sort of cross-networking that, you know, everyone chips in their bit and supports the other. And altogether, everyone gets better off as a result. So I just wanted any examples or any feelings about that, mate.
Absolutely, I can give you a Bellevue specific example, which is handy because that's my football club. So we are the definition of a grassroots club. So we don't actually have we don't have a named sponsor. Like that's how grim our level of football is. We can't get a named sponsor, so we rely on things like grant funding and fundraising, things like that to exist. And the grant funding comes from some really interesting places. So I think last season, the one before COVID, we actually had a £150 donation from a local hip hop artist. And that donation came off the back of, they did a competition across the hip hop and grime community across like Wrexham. They did this competition to basically who could do the best 32 bar rhyme, basically. And there was a guy who won it called Owen, and he was a really nice guy because he won 150 quid and he said, just give it to a charity. And the guy who runs Larynx, which was the organization that put this event on, he kind of thought about it and he was like, oh, do you know, I might give it to that football club. So he came down to give us £150 donation from this rapper, and then he signed for us because he liked what we were doing down at the club. So now the guy who owns Larynx, who put on the competition, is now playing football for us at the same time. And that's straight away we had that cross organization type thing. But then from that, we sort of like, we went a bit further into looking more towards what other small community groups are there out there that we could work alongside in whatever capacity. So I'm currently in talks with the spoken word and poetry collective in Wrexham called Voicebox. They want to do an anthology project about some of the stories within our club, and then we work with. I think we're in the process. We might be announcing it this week that we are going to be stakeholders for Pride Wrexham, which is going to bring Wrexham's first Pride Festival. We've never had a Pride Festival in Wrexham, so we're really excited about that. But all these grassroots organisations working together, I was counting it up. For actually something that's coming out in our local paper in the next couple of days. I was counting out all these people retweeted a stupid tweet that I put out yesterday. And I counted it up, and between all of them, they've got like 50,000 followers. So like the reach we can all give to each other on social media to spread positive messages is monstrous, but it takes that collaboration between cultural incentives that don't normally work together. As you said, like a theatre and a football club, they don't necessarily coalesce the way we think they would, but all it takes is thinkers. Like if you think of a way around the problem, you can get around that problem. There is a way to link theatre to football. It's just how we go about that to best benefit all of the stakeholders, because we're talking about football fans getting into theatre and theatre fans getting into football. There's a way of doing it. We've just got to be innovative in the way we put that together.
So are we going to see any hip hop chants from the crowd at your club?
I've raised this a couple of times with the guy from Larynx, and he always just kind of laughs and walks off. So I don't think we've got a couple of poems that have been written about some of the work we do in the community already. One of them's on the Bellevue YouTube channel. And then the other one is a poet called Double Barreled. We feature he did a collection called Locations, which was where he went and spoke about locations that were important to him on his journey from like childhood to adulthood. And he went to Bellevue Park, and the last bit of his poem is about the way Bellevue Football Club has then grown out of that park to be this beacon of inclusivity in the town. So there are a couple of poems about us. No hip hop tracks as of yet. I'll keep on to Dave about it. I'll get one for you.
Good for you, mate. Great stuff you're doing, mate.
I'm usually sniffy about goal music at football, but I might, on this instance, kind of park that. Just want to draw attention to Lewis's comment. Very similar thoughts in West Wales, where investment seems to finish at the end of the M4. Lewis, it's Glanfair, isn't it? Ferryside, I think originally, sort of in South Carmarthenshire. Mark, another question, I think, yeah?
Yeah, it was a question I asked Alex Hillman when he did your thing, and it's about burnout. I picked up, Delwyn, when you were talking about, it feels like you have to absorb quite a lot of pressure of other people. You talk about people supporting you, but you're supporting a lot of people. It often strikes me that people who are doing that come and they put a lot of pressure on themselves. You say you've got other people to help you, but is there a risk of burnout, and do you see it in other people who are like-minded to you as well, and how do you propose to help them, or how can they help you?
Yeah, absolutely. Burnout's very much a real thing. There's a couple of people that we've worked with through Bellevue that I've seen, toe that line and get dangerously close. But all you can ever do is support them, because people like the ones I know, especially, like, you're never going to talk them out of taking on that workload. You never will. And as a result, all I can do is just keep supporting them, really. The risk of burnout with myself is interesting. So I suffer with like really bad anxiety. And when I started the club, if I'm being honest, I started the club because I was going to lose the football pitch. So the council were going to take away the football pitch because there wasn't a league registered team on there. I put a league registered team on there because I needed football. I'd just been made redundant from a job. I needed football. And then it just kind of grew from there. And I ended up like, if someone's got problems, they know they can come to me, and like, I will shoulder that, I'll take that on for them. I'll help them through it. What I've discovered is taking on everyone else's, it's a word, not like their baggage, but you know what I mean? The load that they're carrying, taking on what they've got to carry on their back and helping them carry it. It's kind of a diversionary tactic, because the more I'm thinking about everyone else's problems, I'm not thinking about what's going on in my own head. And I tell you what, since I started doing it, my mind is quieter. So I used to have really bad insomnia because my anxiety would not let me sleep. But now that I've got other people to fight for, I'm not fighting against my own head, and I sleep better. So with me, the burnout, it's not really been a risk. I get obviously I get weighted down sometimes, which I think I alluded to earlier. Sometimes it does get heavy. But they say behind every great man is a great woman. That's not true in this case. There is a hero that's even more of a hero than anyone could ever claim I was, because he's the man that keeps me going. It's my best mate. He's called Jimmy. He's a lovely guy, and he very much stays in the background of the football club. He's not really involved in it. He stays away from the press side of it. When we win awards and stuff, he's never there because he doesn't want any part of it. All he is my best mate that stands behind me and supports me. So every time I do start to get a bit weighted, I know that no matter what else is going on in the world, if I phone him, he's going to pick up that phone. And no matter what I need to do, even a couple of years ago, I was quite weighted down by a lot of things that had gone on that year specifically. And I felt like I just needed to run away for a little bit. And you can't knock Jimmy. He went out that evening and he bought 2 tickets to Germany. And a week later, we flew out to Germany and just went away for a week. We've both got family in the Westfalen region. So we did, I say a week, it was just over a week. We did half a week going around visiting his family. Then we went and saw my family. And, it was just taking football completely out of the equation and having that reset button, which I need for myself. And that's what I try and encourage in other people that work hard. It's just you have to have those moments to reset. You have to have someone that can help facilitate that. So for everyone that doesn't have a Jimmy, I kind of put myself in that position where if they need a Jimmy, I will be their Jimmy, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Delwyn.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I commend you on your frankness and your honesty and your openness as well, because some of these issues aren't always easy to talk about, certainly for some people. And there's things there that I can identify with. Kerry, sir.
Afternoon all. Delwyn, thanks for that talk. It was really, really interesting. I'm just going to throw something out there on the tribalism stuff we're talking about. And a lot of what's been said has been pitting geographic areas of Wales against each other. And I've been lucky enough to work in this area, and I don't buy that. I know how it works in Welsh government, and good things do get funded. But the tribalism I see in Wales, and the reason things get funded, it's very much political, and it's the Labour decide where money goes, and that can be north, south, but it will invariably be on political decisions. And that's not just at a national level with Labour. I've worked in the Wrexham area, and the local council on ward basis decides where money goes. And decisions, we've got to start looking at it in a little bit more depth, I think. And I'm not disrespecting your view on North Wales against South Wales, but when you look at some of this in a little bit more detail, it's a lot more nuanced. And I think the tribalism side of it is very good. But in my perspective, seeing it from inside Welsh government and outside, it's that political tribalism we've got to address. And that's at a national level and at a local level. And I think that gets masked. It doesn't get talked about enough because we just do it on that geographic, North Wales against South Wales, West Wales. And I don't see that. So that's just something I just wanted to put in, maybe a little controversial, but certainly my experience bears that out more than the reality. And that goes again with Labour areas as well. Decisions I know have been made to make more vulnerable Labour areas stronger politically than strong Labour areas. And that's the way the world works in Wales.
I'd actually agree when I spoke about tribalism between North and South. I like, just to clarify that, I'm referring specifically to perception of that, because it's, as you say, people don't talk about the politics. I think the perception is that there's that divide between North and South, and that would be the thing I'd bring up with Mr. Drakeford is, we can alter that perception. Like my personal belief is we alter that perception if we had a national broadcaster or a national news outlet where we could address that perception, because I think you're exactly right with the politics. I've got a perfect example of politics in football as well. So there's a club in Wrexham. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get myself in too much trouble here. There's a club in Wrexham which has been trying to get an asset transfer for their pitch for 10 years. And to this day, still don't have any luck with that. They're still on a council rented facility. There's another club that put in for an asset transfer, which was turned over in 6 weeks. I think it was. Don't quote me on the exact time, but it was quick. I think it was 6 weeks that they managed to get that pitch turned over. What I'll point out is the club that got their pitch within a matter of weeks, they happen to have a very prominent councillor in a very prominent position. The club that's been trying for 10 years, they have a councillor who's not that powerful in the council. So you can see those politics at work. But I think you're exactly right that the politics gets overlooked. And that's why I think a national broadcaster or a national news outlet would narrow that gap between what I'd say North and South is the perception. We need to pull that together. There is that perception, as I say, with the theatre example, the one that went in South Wales, there's that perception of why that theatre went is the North-South divide. And I was a bit perturbed by it because we do only have one theatre in North Wales, and I think there's there is a perception, and a perception is the first thing we need to change through, as I say, a national media would be amazing, because we'd start to change that perception. Once you change the perception, you can then start looking into the politics.
Do you want to come back on that, Kerry? Lewis has dropped a comment in, and I was going to leave the last comment to Andy, but if you want to come back on that, Kerry, I'm sure if that hand is a...
No, I'm reading the comments. I'm trying to do several things at once. Sorry, everyone, but it has been a really fascinating presentation, Delwyn. So I wish you and Bellevue all the luck as well.
Thank you very much.
Go on, Andy, and I'll read.
And I think the issue about north-south boundaries, political party boundaries, and I think that's the issue we face. I mean, I get really frustrated listening to BBC Wales, and they talk about on a Saturday they got the football, and they go through Swansea, Cardiff, Newport, Wrexham, and absolutely no reference to the Welsh League. And they might come back and say, "Oh, the numbers are not good for that." Well, why are the numbers not good? Because you're not bloody mentioning them, and as if it don't exist. And so I think that's the issue really about boundaries. And I think the more we can get more bottom-up led approach to the world, whether it's politics, even referencing the football. As I say, I think that's one of the big challenges we've got, is to expand our range of vision of north-south political parties, and even sort of up and down the scale of things.
Exactly right. I think that's exactly right. Again, it's tribalism is such a thing that you can get with the north-south perception. You get people from the north who will just abjectly hate people from the south for no reason whatsoever, but they probably hate each other because of their political affiliations. And the tribalism is just it's something that really needs addressing, because we are such a small country. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Martin Sheen that said, "For a tiny country, nobody sings louder." That's exactly right. I hark all the way back to Euro 2016. I don't think we've got any Wrexham people here really, have we? Apart from me. But if anyone was in Wrexham around the time of Euro 2016, I hope you enjoyed it, because once every game finished, even when we lost against Portugal, literally thousands of people would pour out the pubs into the main road through Wrexham, block off the entire street, just having the biggest party. Not a single arrest. Not a single arrest. Those people had no tribalism when they remembered that we're all from Wales. We're all cut from the same cloth. We're all Welsh people, and that's what we have as our defining characteristic, is when you're in Wales, you become Wales. That quote actually came from a man from Nicaragua who loves it here and never wants to go home, because he said, when you're in Wales, you become Wales. And he's right. Wales is not a country, just the same as Wrexham's not a geographical boundary. There is no north-south divide. There is no political distinctions. If we all just remember that we are one Wales, we'll all get on better. And you know what? I'm really glad that point's been brought up, because now I get to quote my club motto at you, because this is a belief I've held since I started the club. Our club motto is "In club, in bobble, in edig." One club, one people, united. And what we're doing at Bellevue should stand as an example to everyone, that if we all just stop trying to fight each other and work towards what's best for, a fluid and evolving society, you can achieve amazing things. You've got to put the tribalism to one side and do it.
Delwyn, inspiring. Given that we're not all that happy with how democracy works, I'm going to be very autocratic, and I'm going to wrap it up there because the weekend is almost upon us. I've also got, my wife is from Wrexham, so I'm going to do my bit for North-South relations and take her out for the lunch I promised her as well. Safe travel to Lewis. Thank you for the comments. I'll save the chat and I'll circulate that. One thing from Andy was, although a Londoner was split rails around things they met in the Euros. I'm not sure I believe you, Andy, actually, but okay, I'll let that pass.
I'll give you one, Andy, that if you can come here and say that you're a Welshman, you can be a Welshman and you'll never forget it. During that Euros experience, I met a lovely guy called Mike and his wife Angela. Now Angela's English born and bred, but Mike was a Wrexham lad, and they're both from Otley in Yorkshire.
Oh yeah.
And every single time Wales had a game, he felt utterly devastated to be watching a Wales game in England. So he drove 109 miles to Wrexham to go sit in the pub, watch the game, and then he drove home with his wife for every single game of that Euros. So yeah, if you can call yourself a Welshman, be a Welshman and be proud.
I'm not sure if he was Nicaraguan or from Otley for that matter, but I think there's that famous saying that anyone can be Welsh as long as they're prepared to put up with the consequences. And on that point, I will now wrap it up.
And the neighbours.
Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the rugby if that's your thing, and look after yourselves and others. Thank you, Dale.